What is up, down, and sideways, all you beautiful individuals? It is another Epi of League Unlock here. Mark here with you fine, feathered individuals, and we are going back in time, reliving some amazing, some tragic, some heartbreaking moments as we gear up for the World Championship. It's a perfect time to look back at the history. We're talking 2-decade-long, almost, history of the Telecom War. KT versus T1 or SKT, because we're definitely going back to the years when it was SK Telecom.
Yes, and it is important to take this visit down memory lane, go back the 2 decades, as you said, that this rivalry has existed within League of Legends, because yes, we're getting another iteration, the latest iteration, and of course, it's going to be for a World Championship title. Important to visit the history of one of the most storied rivalries in League of Legends.
And the history, SKT/T1 versus KT, we're talking about 98 wins for T1/SKT, 52 wins for KT. So that like 150 games these two organizations have played against each other. But the rivalry predates League of Legends itself. This all started when Boxer was founding the team that would eventually be sponsored by SKT in 2004, matching up against a main rival in Yellow, who would eventually be part of a team, KTF Magic NS, that became KT Roaster in 2009. But we're talking about Starcraft. We're talking Brood War before even Starcraft 2 came out, kind of the birthplace of esports in South Korea, which eventually spread to the whole world.
I like to consider it one of the true births of esports, right? Because I'm sure we can go even further back down the line and find some type
Talk
of
about Doom, early Halo.
Of course, you can get into that, but I think really one of the biggest booms about this turning towards a professional style, professional environment is that Starcraft boom in South Korea. And yes, looking back at the history of it, finding the connections, finding some rivalry here at the earliest days, really, of where the scene picks up in South Korea is one of the unbelievable facts and starting points of this great rivalry.
Then you have to wait until, 2012 before OGN starts revving up. SKT and KT both have sister teams, kind of. You had KT Bullets, KT Arrows, SKT1, S and K, very long names back then. But this rivalry really heats up. We're going 2013, and this is, of course, the infamous reverse sweep, and still the most known play in League of Legends, of course. Everybody take a shot, because we're putting the Ryu versus Faker Zed clip.
Of course, yes, Faker, what was that? Look at the moves. Everybody loves seeing this clip. And again, it's one of those ones where I think, especially over the last half decade, you really are seeing the difference in where we have come as a game since then to now. Never mind, thinking maybe, again, might be time to turn back the clock to get some of these mirror matchups in Game 5s type of situations. Would be fun to have again. But yes, this is a significant moment. This is that reverse sweep. This is, of course, the real start of getting to Faker's mega legacy that he will build. And it is, of course, one of the big milestones to take a checkup on when you're looking at the T1 and KT rivalry.
Yeah, kind of the main coming out or entrance party for Faker to say, okay, this guy's something special. SKT is going to be a team to be feared. And, 12 years later, we're still talking about that. But then you can jump a year ahead. Really, it took a while for this rivalry to actually rev up into something other than just being the two biggest telecom companies in South Korea. But 2014 Summer Finals, it wasn't the SKT main team, but you saw Rookie. That's right, IG Rookie on KT beating down the sister team SKT T1S, which had Easy Hoon, Bang, and Wolf before they all got promoted to the main SKT roster. And this was KT coming away with the dub.
And that's also one of the important things looking back on this rivalry is remembering just how many of the mega stars that we all know and love and have come to, talk about throughout the scene over the course of careers that have already wrapped up now and careers that are still going from this legacy. And that is, again, rookie, one of the biggest ones here looking back on it. You know, we can go back and even an old LTA, LCS name, an Arrow. You know, he's from this type of series as well. We've certainly seen our fair share, and it is one of the best. And I think this is where it really starts to, again, pick up, is when you start to get these pushbacks. You start to get the wins back for KT. Yes, I know we went over the overall series record, and it is very strongly in favor of T1, but more than enough wins start to pick up for KT, where it becomes this heated position for that top spot in the LCK.
And, you know, KT, a fantastic team in the LCK themselves, but this is where they start to rue and hate SKT, because the 2015, maybe still the most dominant year out of SKT, is when they're beaten up on Someday and the boys in the summer finals. It's a pretty swift 3-0. In the spring playoffs of 2016, it's another pretty swift 3-0. The rivalry is not much of a rivalry. It's just SKT beating up on KT. But then, in those summer playoffs, KT get their revenge, reverse sweeping 3 years after SKT did it to them. 3 years later in the summer split, they reverse sweep SKT to go to the finals, where they ultimately lose to Rocks and then lose in the Gauntlet to not even make Worlds. But they did beat SKT in the playoffs.
So yes, of course, there's always the KT bitter taste of defeat that lingers in there somewhere, somehow. But it wasn't T1 that time around. That was the killer for KT. That was important. I think it is also kind of a nice little note to check in on the Rocks Tigers in that finals, because again, as we all know, that is a very important squad and future members of KT roster. But yes, this really was finally one of the bigger swingbacks for KT, even if it didn't amount to anything from it, which almost is in itself one of the most KT statements you can make.
And throughout all these games, all this history, you only have to look to the reaction of the players after a lot of these sets, because this was the semifinals in 2016 summer. It wasn't the finals. They didn't win the title. As you said, they lost to Rocks in the finals. But the emotion from KT for beating SKT in a best of 5, it looked like they had just captured the title.
Yeah, and again, this is a SKT that had just started to really establish on the world stage what it would mean to be an international champion, one of these juggernaut dynasties in the making, and to be a stop that interrupts any bit of that ascension for T1 was a big deal for KT. Absolutely a moment to celebrate, and you're right, seeing the euphoria that the players had and the coaching staff getting that win, and you know, the old days is a fun memory to go back and look at.
As Mark alluded to, we go into that 2017 year. Rocks Tigers can't get it done against SKT, so they say, let's make the super team with the biggest rival for SKT at the time, and the Avengers are assembled with Smeb, Deft, Mata, Pan, all joining score on KT roster to make this super team. And we get the clash in the spring finals. Peanut going against his former boys, and it's a swift 3-0 for SKT. The rivalry continues.
Oh, and this is the one that, and again, you mentioned that angle. That's the one that is the thing that sticks out to me, is so many of the key members of Rocks Tigers joining, going to KT to power up this competitor to T1, finally have another mega squad, except for your boy Peanut, who goes to the dark side. He joins the evil empire and makes that win against KT, and goes on to have a phenomenal MSI for T1 and a dominant show of force from them. But yes, it is KT who felt like this is it. We're gonna get the big brawl, big absolute silver scrapes banger for the finals that everybody knows we've been waiting for a Telecom war. Except we didn't. And we didn't get anything close to that one. It was all T1.
And there was even, the Wombo Combo comeback in the regular season that SKT got against KT, where they were down like 10K. So yes, they absolutely get the last laugh. And then even in summer, it's much more contested. It's a banger Game 5 set, which becomes kind of par for the course as we evolve this Telecom war. But again, it's SKT coming out on top. And again, it's KT falling to the gauntlet and not qualifying for the World Championship. It always just felt like losing to T1 was like the final nail in the coffin, and they could never refocus to qualify for these World Championships.
And specifically this year felt bad because it felt like wasted potential. It was a wasted year for that roster, for those players to not have an international opportunity, because you can absolutely go down the route and talk about what type of their chances were, what matches you could think you could possibly have at the World Championship or whatever, but it didn't matter because you didn't secure that spot in that event, despite being a team that should have been able to accomplish that type of ticket. But hold on, KT fans, because this roller coaster, you've been like, what the heck? It's only been down from here. I've just been picking up speed. Where's the up? Where's the loop-de-loop? We're hitting one of those for 2018 for KT Rolster.
Yeah, and again, entropy is proven right as SKT hits their lull after losing the 2017 finals. They have far and away their worst split in the LCK. Don't even make playoffs in summer, and that opens the door for KT. But they bring back the same roster, except UCal comes in to sub in for Pawn, and they finally get Score and the organization's first LCK title.
Yes, and this was, what a big moment this was. I remember for a lot of people, it was so cathartic to get Score. That championship was one of the big driving forces for that team. But again, going through the history of this rivalry, looking at this roster that was assembled and the failure of the year before to finally beat it and get to that mountaintop in the LCK and to push down your rival at that moment is absolutely significant. The way that T1 didn't really show up at all throughout that year, the way that they struggled through their roster and issues like that, KT were there. They were the ones leading the charge and taking the torch to the World Championship as the leaders of the LCK.
And avoiding the gauntlet, all the demons of playoffs past, they roar into that World Championship as the top seed. We know how it ends up playing out, but we've said this many times. They were probably still the second best team at that tournament. They just drew IG in quarters. Just gotta say it.
One of the unlucky draws of history. One of those ones where, yes, you can tighten it down and say, well, you had to beat the best at some point, right? So you still failed the same task that everybody else would have on the path to becoming champion. But yes, it is one of those ones where you look through that series, the performances of it, evaluating the power of those players. You certainly can envision a road to victory out of that series as well for IG. Unfortunate, but it is absolutely still a year to celebrate that championship within the domestic region.
Unfortunately, after that year, things again kind of separate. We get the retooled SKT, the Khan, Teddy, Mata era coming in, and then KT, they lose a lot of these stars. Maybe they're hitting towards the end of their careers, so it's basically 3 years almost. You're going 2019 to 2022, where this rivalry isn't much of a rivalry because during this stretch, KT's barely or not even making playoffs. This is when Prey is coming out of retirement. There's so many different roster swaps going on, but the meat of the story is KT was not competing, and even SKT wasn't at the top here because we kind of entered the Dom1 era.
Dom1 era happened. Gen G starts to truly emerge as an organization that is taking it to that top level. Hanwha Life is in here a little bit. Yeah, absolutely changing things up within the power structure of the LCK, with both T1 and KT floundering during this time period. Roster iterations, roster shuffles not working, coaching shuffles not working out for both of these squads. It did take a while until we return to having either one of these squads actually really have any type of importance on saying, yeah, we need this win in the Telecom war to keep moving forward, keep pushing down our path of our goal of championship. But we do get there, and that is the important one to keep track of.
We move on from the Dark Ages, and it takes a light warrior like Cuz leaving T1, or more accurately being kicked off of T1, and eventually finding his way onto KT. We get into 2023, and the rivalry is renewed. We get a 5-game banger in the spring split playoffs to kind of prove, KT's a top 3 team again, and this is as SKT or T1 now has lost in the World Finals, but they've settled on this what is now Dynasty level roster.
Yes, this is again where we start to see the most familiar faces for T1 fans at this point, especially the current Dynasty fans, because yes, this is pretty much your starting lineup all the way through that this squad is showing through. And it is important to mention as we head towards the future World Championship that will be ahead of us. Yes, this is where the shift happens from Cuz being a member of T1, all of a sudden finding his road down the line to being on KT. But who's there? It's Owner. He's there. Kyria is there as well. You're looking at Guma. He's there for T1. Yes, you're looking at a lot of the big building blocks finding their way onto that roster and changing it and changing the tune of how this Telecom war plays out. Because yes, it's back to being important.
And even though T1 kind of become these titans, you still have the most peak of roster coasters in 2023. This is the Faker injury. T1 limps into playoffs. KT are 17-1. The first team all-pro curse across the board. They get to the next round of playoffs and they say, T1 looks weak. We're going to pick them, no problem. And we have learned since then, you never pick T1 in playoffs, Mark. Never.
It's the worst feeling ever. This is the most painful moment for the KT fans within looking back at this rivalry. And unfortunately, there are quite a few pain points as we've talked about. But when you are looking at this, yes, this has got to be that moment, because you know what? I still agree with it. I still agree with that mentality that they had and the evaluation of what they were and what T1 was performing at the time. That yes, this was the move I would have made in the same shoes in the playoffs, but I know it's the wrong move. Looking back on history and how the performances went and what monsters this T1 team becomes, that was not the path that I would have chosen. Not to say that the other avenue was all that much easier for KT. This really is, again, the LCK, and we're cutting it real close at the very top. But absolutely, this is going to be one of the big pain points. You could have had this one. As you move on from this, there are a few other upsets and pushbacks that KT does get, never to the significant degree that this loss cost them here.
Yeah, and again, this is one of the few times that KT were the favorites in this rivalry, right? Again, 17-1 regular season. They go on to lose not once, but twice in these playoffs in Game 5 to SKT. And of course, Game 5 heartbreaks are kind of the theme on this list for KT. Because remember, 2024, now we just remember it as SKT or T1 being back-to-back world champions. But they were down 5K gold against KT in Game 5 of the Gauntlet qualification. This is when there was the Deft Barrel bot lane alongside BDD and Piosic, 3/5 of the DRX team that had upset T1, and they can't get it done. T1 barely qualifies and then go on to win another world championship.
They deny the last dance for Deft on this time around with KT. And yes, this became another world championship run. Again, one of the most unlikely world championship runs from this dynasty that is reborn in T1, the way that they have captured that world championship title time and time again. This one hurt for KT to be that far ahead, to have it that much in hand. It becomes one of these situations where it's not about, well, you know what? We could have won this series. We could have advanced. You should have won this series. You should have been the one representing and had that opportunity, but you're not, and you got to hit back on it. And we get back to this year in the LCK and what we get to see from this rivalry. We've had it both ways. We've had important wins for KT, a KT win against T1, which frankly changed the whole situation of the LCK heading into that last week of what games mattered and how the positioning was going to be. And we know that both of these teams are heading in good form and fashion. very excited to look at another historic iteration of the Telecom Wars.
Yeah, that win again was KT's only win against the top 3 teams. They were 1-8 combined against Genji, Hanwha, and T1. So obviously gave them a confidence boost going through there. Even earlier in the year, we had the Road to MSI series, the now infamous one, which has both Doran dying to Krugs and then saving a game with an Otacon steal, all within the same series.
That's the other thing that I don't think we truly have gotten to the story of it. T1 and KT series are never boring the way the games will play out. Yeah, there are a handful of unexpected 3-0s and sweeps in there, but recently, more so in the last half decade, I will certainly say it is always that unexpected banger. Doesn't matter the trajectory of both of these teams. And with the trajectory of both of these teams looking good, that's the only other thing on top of it where I'm expecting that this one could have the magic to go the distance.
And now, listen, throughout this whole history, we come to the modern time, the matchup at the World Championship being the first time you actually get these teams matching up on the international stage. This incredible rivalry has all been within the domestic region of the LCK, and you look at all the heartbreak, all the near wins that KT has been unable to get through. It feels like the poetic way of the universe should be KT getting the last laugh to win their first ever World Championship and finally be able to take down somebody, well, not somebody, their main rival in T1, who are going to back World Finals. KT seems destined for the win. There's going to be people rooting for both sides. Obviously, SKT are always at the top of the fan base. People want them to win, but I think this KT roller coaster, this magical ride that they've been on, upsetting Genji not once but twice to get here, it feels like the stars, the universe, the cosmos have aligned and it feels like KT deserves to reach this summit of taking down T1 on the highest stage to kind of reignite this Telecom war rivalry. But that is it today for Liga Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you, absolute stunners. Thanks so much for hanging out, and we will catch you on that flippity flip.